I think a lot of modern beauty standards, like the baseline of it is erase your animal as much as possible. But the truth is that we are animals. Until they replace us with robots, like you can't undo that fact.
Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those who don't know me, I'm a life coach, a hypnotist, a former birth worker, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, you'll learn about the ideologies, industries, and technologies attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, pornography, prostitution, and the many tentacles of the medical industrial complex. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In the masterclasses available on my site, as well as my one-on-one coaching and hypnosis, you will learn to stop getting triggered by every freaking thing, learn to cultivate resilience, gain knowledge, and if we're working together one-on-one, stop unwanted behaviors and increase your self-confidence. You can book your first session and check out the masterclasses in the library at whosebodyisit.com. And I just want to say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular content for you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're just listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider making a financial contribution via the link in my show notes. You can also support the podcast by getting your activist stickers. So my pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. I've been wanting to do a body hair episode since I started the Whose Body Is It podcast. And it's just one of those topics that has remained on my list, but it felt like the right time to record, particularly because I found myself in Israel now and have been blown away by the conditioning around body hair removal, which again exists in the US, but because of the ethnic demographic of just generally hairier people, the body hair thing is a big issue here in that I have been asked to defend the existence of mine and the choice to keep it as is. And yeah, it just felt like the right time to do it. So my dear friend Danielle Evans is back again. And yeah, we're going to be talking about body hair through the lens of her expertise in nervous system work. And while it may be true that there are more urgent battles than armpit hair, this conversation goes far beyond surface level talk on self-acceptance and trash talking modern beauty standards. We explore women's desire to remain intact and fully expressed in spite of societal conditioning to become smaller, sterilized, to erase ourselves, to numb out. Danielle tells the story of getting her first razor at the age of 12 under the influence of emaciated and hairless bodies in 17 magazine. And, many will still argue that shaving is a hygiene practice and like clipping your toenails or brushing your teeth. But in actuality, hair removal practices are purely cultural and they have nothing to do with cleanliness. So, whether influenced by commercialized bodies in porn or mass culture, it's no wonder that most adults have never seen an adult woman's body unaltered by hair removal. Shocking. And that now body hair on women is seen as more masculine than I would say in the past, in the previous 10 years, because it's becoming increasingly associated with non-binary and trans identities. So we hope that the ideas presented in this episode challenge you to consider your body hair as more as an aesthetic choice or preference that you have come to of your own free will, and instead as an essential part of your human physiology, a sensory tool for interfacing with your environment. Here is that episode. Would you start us off, Danielle, with your body hair story? When did you first start shaving or removing your leg or armpit hair?
I can very vividly remember getting my first razor at 12 years old. It was something that I asked for Christmas, and my parents obliged that desire. And in thinking about it, these past few days preparing for this, I remembered my great Aunt Margaret, visiting with her around Christmas time, and she asked me what I got, and I told her with much delight that I had asked for a razor and had received one. And I can remember her kind of trepidation around like, oh, or surprise, like, you're really young to be shaving your legs. I remember receiving that concern with the emotional, like, what do you know, Aunt Margaret? This is what all the kids are doing, right? Yeah, and remembering that now, I just have a lot of love for her, like showing that concern to me. Yeah, so I started shaving my legs when I was 12. I'm assuming my armpits. I don't know why it wouldn't have not been included. That continued until I was 19. And the invitation to stop shaving was a multifaceted invitation. I think a lot of it had to do with the culture that I was living in. I moved from this rural town to Austin, Texas, and I was hanging out with kind of like hippie, crunchy people, and witnessing it on other women's bodies gave me that permission to think about like, oh, is this something that I really want to do? Because even before I started to truly question it, it's time consuming, it's uncomfortable, etc. And then it's been in the more recent years that I've really thought about the physiological impact of what removing body hair means, and kind of the tinfoil hat aspect of what it does to women's bodies to have this expectation.
You had mentioned to me that 17 magazine was something that you grew up on. And I think I also watched, I can't even remember what we did with magazines. I think I also maybe subscribed to 17 magazine, and it was definitely influenced. I remember like other magazines a bit more, like Teen Vogue was like a big one that I really liked. You said something to me the other day about like thinking you were gonna just like get to read your horoscope. Like you were buying this magazine thinking like I'm gonna get a horoscope reading. Can you speak a little bit on your experience or how you reflect now on all of your exposure to 17 magazine specifically?
Totally. In unpacking, how did I come to desire at 12 to have a razor to shave my legs? The first thing that came up, I mentioned culture. So being in a particular culture, I want to invite women to think about how it implants ideas that are not 100% your own. So when I moved to Austin, being in a culture that was more hippie, crunchy, etc., invited me to no longer alter my body in this way. Well, what initiated me into body alteration, I believe, was being subject to things like Teen Vogue, or for me, 17 magazine. I used to buy this religiously with my childhood best friend. We would buy it every single month with the intention of reading our horoscope. And, you know, when you're 12, 13, 14, and you're spending like your little allowance on something, just because that was the intention, was to get the horoscope, doesn't mean that I didn't take in the body of work that would have been a particular issue. So yeah, so 17 magazine was a huge one for me. And I, in preparing for this episode, looked at kind of the history of this magazine. And, you know, it's a publication. So it is, the idea is that there is a target audience. There is intention to sell particular ideas or brands or looks. I feel, especially for my generation, I'm 32, the look at the turn of the century was a very infantilized look, a very altered look. And in fact, in looking, like researching 17, I found that in 2012, readers protested against the magazine for digital manipulation of photos. And so I just, like, thinking about all of that, it made me see even more clearly. And I'm someone who recognizes my program and my programming very broadly. Like, no one gets out unscathed by the popular culture. Yeah, it just makes me see that that 12-year-old self had been inoculated with a vision of beauty standard that I now come to view as deeply grotesque, of like, stay infantilized at all costs. And yeah, that's something that we can get into more, the fact that culture is different in different cities and different countries. I feel lucky that, yeah, that I was able to transplant into Austin, which gave me the invitation to really recognize that.
This is like a bit of a tangent, but I've heard this from a number of women that they understand their programming around the body hair and like removing body hair, but they're hesitant to grow it out because they don't want to be mistaken for like the non-binary, like lib femme type. And it is a marker. Like that's where we have overlap on a visual level. Like, and it would make sense that moving out of the more rural traditional values, which in its weird distortion includes hair removal, like normalizing hair removal, to like a more quote progressive city where you would find women in Austin, the crunchy hippie types. But I just remembered this, like women like grieving to me, especially women who are situated in more liberal, quote, liberal progressive cities, don't want to signify that they believe that like men can become women, and they fear that, like, especially women of like college age, like in university, I've heard this from, also because women on testosterone will start to grow in excess.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not their body in their natural state. They are growing in excess of body hair, which is also a marker of like, oh, you're actually toying with nature. But then we have women in our position, in which we're not on synthetic hormones. We don't believe men can become women and women can become men. We reject many, if not all, parts of a liberal feminist rhetoric, but then there's this body hair thing. And we'll get into more of this later, but like the choice to keep the hair as is often criticized as an ideological choice, like just a feminist thing. And we could make an argument why that is also true, but that is not the lens through which we are going to be defending the existence of our mammalian, just our expression. What I also just remembered in conversation with a friend today was how popular it was to remove arm hair as well. Do you remember
Mhm.
like shaving your arms? Like,
I never did, but I absolutely knew women who did.
I think I shaved
And
my arms once.
hmm, yeah, there's a couple of things that are coming up. I want to tread lightly and just preface this as a generalization in regards to like, oh, you don't want to signify being whatever. I've read this author, David Dita, who does work around polarity. And I once read him, he wrote this thing about women, that there are three layers of women. There's artificial woman, which would be like push up bra, high heels, lipstick, Botox, shaved body, etc. Her inner animus or king, like the yin and yang aspect, and then the layer of like authentic woman, which is like baby on the breast, barefoot, real, raw, biological woman. And I'm not saying like if you subscribe to any of the body modification, I'm not saying that that is like terrible, do what you wish in your own way. But yeah, I think that it's a layered distortion. The trans ideology is layered in the sense that most often you see non-binary expression as the caricature of the opposite. And the distortion is that women's bodies are physiologically meant to have hair. It serves a deep purpose in our nervous system. Every single hair has what's called a hair ending organ that registers the slightest movement of each hair. You can see the hair as an antenna for the nervous system, and it's registering in the dermis. So this is accepted by neurologists that the skin is the outside of the brain. It is the brain and second only to the brain as far as interfacing with our environment. And when we shave our hair anywhere, we are muting our ability to interface. Like we're numbing out, which is why oftentimes you'll see people like use the excuse of, oh, I tried to grow my hair out and the pricklies were just too agitating. Yeah, it's because you've been numbing out for however long, and it takes some time to get used to like the sensory input coming back online.
We're gonna come back to the like nervous system element and the kind of antenna and the numbing again later in the episode. I want to return to the like your just like personal background and stories around this, like particularly the what you had mentioned earlier, like being bombarded with the images of unrealistic standards and totally manipulated bodies of women. And like you mentioned that there was outrage to the digital manipulation of the images in 17. It's like that is just the standard. Like you'd be hard pressed to find a photo that isn't digitally
Mm.
manipulated. Like it's so funny. It's quite sad, but also funny to think like that was outrageous back then,
Mhm.
considered to be now it's the norm. And actually, as I described that, I just now remember a Vogue magazine that my mom had saved to me. I think it came out maybe 2 years ago, and it was the non-binary trans edition. And they put a woman on the cover with armpit hair, like showing her armpit hair. And she had breasts. It wasn't like a woman who also had a double mastectomy on testosterone. It was just a woman showing her armpit hair. And I was really upset that that is the way that they framed the opportunity to showcase like a biological expression in under this umbrella of hormonal and surgical manipulation and like narcissism and severe mental health issues. Like it was really, really upset, but I saved a copy. I still have the magazine at my mom's. It was a woman, if anyone knows which issue I'm talking about, it was a woman with a baseball cap, sleeveless, with her armpit hair exposed. For the people who are saying, well, we do see women with armpit hair. Well, when we do, it's typically super sexualized, or it's under the LGBTQ like distortion.
Mm.
So that was coming up for me as you share. But I'm so excited to get more into the rebuttals to why women are choosing the reasons they give to continue the practice of body hair removal. I find really fascinating because I also used to say them and believe them that this was the reason why I did it, right? And that it was a preference and a choice. And I'm like I have a lot of judgments about it, and I really feel, and you'll hear it throughout this episode, like I feel very judgmental about it, and I feel that it's a blind spot that a lot of women have right now, who are doing amazing work in the world, and I don't think it's like an essential thing to unlock, but I'm curious about what can occur when we unlock this thing that no matter how much we talk about embodiment and health and wellness, this just still seems to be a thing, like a spell that sovereign women are still under.
Mm-hmm.
That's my harshest judgment about this.
Yeah, I think I want to say hair removal is thousands of years old, and there's different reasons that we've done it. The modern context, which is really what I want to stay with, is actually based off of some Darwinian writings. 19th century experts linked hairiness to, quote, sexual inversion, disease pathology, lunacy, and criminal violence, end quote. Those connotations mostly being applied to women over men. And 20th century, as far as like American Western culture, because I believe that's what we're speaking to, as that is our experience in our culture, the practice was a way to separate from cruder people, lower class Americans, and immigrants. So there's like a lot of classism. There's a lot wrapped into it. Like, I'm separating myself from the dirtier people. And that just is not true. Hairiness does not equate to uncleansed people. Like, the two are not synonymous. But that's the idea that a lot of people hold today.
The Darwin thing makes so much sense and totally blew my mind when you shared that. And going back to like the numbing out, like also just creating a homogenous smell. Like, let's have everyone remove all the body hair and sell them the same deodorants and perfumes and axe sprays, completely removing the individuality of the expression. And you had told me like the story. Can you share the story about the peeled apples?
Yes. Yeah. So, believe it or not, your pheromones, your sweat is as unique as a fingerprint. And there's a lot being communicated in biological life, when we are sharing and taking in pheromone from other people. And the story is that a common practice was that women, if I'm not mistaken, this would have been like 19th century, women would peel apples and rub them under their armpits and then wrap that apple up to give to like a suitor or a lover to eat. And men had like a slightly different ritual of taking a handkerchief and wiping their underarms and like waving it like a flag as they walked through like town or crowds. And this was a delight. We would delight in experiencing other pheromone fingerprints. And again, the delight is like when it is delightful, it's essentially saying like this is other, not brother. Like the smell is informing your biology of this is a good mate.
Mm.
Like our genetics
Mm.
are good for each other. We're not like coming with the same stuff,
This
right?
is, what did you say? This is other, not brother.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my
So
gosh.
like when we are communicating with our bodies, this is body communication and body language, biological language. And so living in a culture that suppresses and sanitizes to every measure, there's something to that. There's something to like making you blind
Mm.
biologically. Yeah. So that's an example of that was in vogue. Those practices were in vogue and enjoyable and delightful for everyone. And so, again, just bringing the invitation for the audience to be curious about like, you may have a thought or a point of view that you feel is completely your own, and it's absolutely not. It was, you have arrived at that point by the guidance of pop culture and the specific culture that you find yourself living in.
Yes. And it becomes like with the based on what you've just shared, it's like especially the Darwin stuff is like it creates a class divide because we know that some ethnicities are hairier than others, right? There's a reason why the laser hair removal industry is so popular in the Middle East is because you find more like hairier people. And this episode, we are talking about women, but we also know that the industries do also target men, that men are shamed for specifically their back hair. It's like men are made fun of and told like they're gross because of their back hair. I remember I had a boyfriend whose girlfriends all made him shave his back hair, and I was like, no, please, please don't shave it. I like it. Please keep it. Actually find it very feminine, like if you were to remove it. Like, please don't do that. And I maybe I couldn't even like I shouldn't even label it as feminine, but it's just it was indicating that a discomfort in the body, a
Yeah.
discomfort in the skin, which makes me very sad. And so the loss of communication, and I think it's in vogue now to talk about the effects of hormonal birth control and how we smell differently and are attracting partners who are not as masculine
Mm-hmm.
when we're on the pill. But this is a I think what you're saying is so, so important that when we remove our body hair and our pheromones, specifically our armpit hair, that might create a distinct smell to us. More so than the other parts of our body, maybe like compared to our legs or like the hair on our arms, that we are missing an opportunity to like vet, and like I'm living in Israel, and like place like Israel, it's like there's so much genetic testing to make sure that this person is not your brother and they
Yeah.
are your other, and it's like maybe we can fucking wipe out the whole genetic testing industry just by letting people fucking grow their armpit hair back. I don't know. It's just a theory.
There's just so much. It's not only pheromones, but it's giving you like biological feedback to your own state,
Mm,
like your smell. It can
yeah.
be informing in many ways to health. Yeah, so it's just another aspect of numbing out. I think a lot of modern beauty standards are like the baseline of it is erase your animal as much as possible. But that's the truth. The truth is that we are animals. Until they replace us with robots, like you can't undo that fact.
What would your response be to someone who says, but Danielle, like we do other things, like we brush our teeth and like we clip our nails. Like, don't you think that it would it be more animal if we never clipped our nails or never brushed our teeth? Are you suggesting that we just, that we just abandon all things because they're not biological?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction when you pose that to me is that like dental hygiene is important to the health of the body. Um, and shaving hair has nothing to do with the hygiene of the body. And in fact, stunts the body's ability to interface with its environment. And so I don't believe those to be comparable. Yeah, I mean, it's technically body modification, but that comparison would come from someone who thinks that body hair is a hygienic issue. And it is absolutely not a hygienic issue. You can shower and it is not a hygienic issue, period. So yeah, that would be my response is like, think about how you're thinking about the body.
Yeah. And like long nails, I mean, it is a totally ridiculous comparison, but it's one that came up in the comment section. It's one that's come up in conversations with people that I know. It's one of those rebuttals that people that have. But yeah, I love your response. I think that's a really excellent response. Like that oral hygiene is for keeping the body healthy. And actually so is body hair.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. And as far as the nails, it's like to a degree that's hygienic too. Like I mean, if you have long nails and you take care of them, that's great. I'll say from my experience as a body worker, like I keep my nails very short because it's a hygienic issue
Mhm.
of not scratching like your skin, injury, etc. So yeah, I just don't think that that's in the same realm. The only way that it is in the same realm is yes, it's body, but it's not the same topic as body hair removal.
Totally. And also, like, it's understood that both sexes brush their teeth and clip their nails. Yeah, you could make the case like women tend to have longer nails or want to do their nails longer, blah, blah, blah. But like, there's also an argument that I've heard that, okay, well, men and women are different and we like different things. So why is it a problem that we have arrived at this place in culture where only women are expected to remove their body hair? Like a case for some people try to make the case that this is just actually a natural like cultural evolution, and I also find that totally ridiculous. Yeah, what is your response to that? That we just over time we just decided aesthetically that we like it better without.
Well, that is a very sweeping statement because I think that if that's how you feel, that we like it better, it's indicating that that might be true in your specific corner of culture. That hearing you say that makes me think of Darwin and like, okay, some person writes this as like creating this new standard that just isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're mostly focusing on women, I'll just say, like, I know a lot of men who it doesn't bother in the least being with a woman who has hair. And that, again, is linked to their cultural experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they weren't inundated as much with the program. Yeah, I don't believe that it is something that we prefer. For me, it feels absolutely like this expectation thrust upon women. And again, you can do what you want, but for me, it really does come back to the physiological purpose. And to me, modern day beauty standards for women are often like the baseline of that is like, you are unable to expand into the rhythm of life. Do not be big in the rhythm of life. Shrink yourself as much as possible, numb yourself. And yeah, I don't think that it's preferred. And there actually are many cultures outside of Western culture that's not the standard.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe it to be true that this is just something that we prefer. And if it actually were an evolution, then the body itself would stop growing hair.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. I 100% agree. Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the like expansion, I definitely feel, well, I feel expanded. I mean, I'm a tiny person, but but because I have body hair, like at the beach, like I definitely feel like there's an expansion. I think also because you become more visible, you're expressing in a way that is different depending on where you are. I would say where I am right now, it's very unusual to see women with body hair at the beach. And I definitely feel that expansion. And I want to talk more about the sobering process. And it's hard to talk about this without like sounding righteous, like, or sounding like self-righteous, but there is a sobering element to all of a sudden noticing how unusual the choice is and the indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
Because chances are, if you're a woman who has chosen to keep her body as is in its natural state, you have been asked to defend your choice. It's like disgusting until proven mammalian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to loop back into when I was researching 17 magazine. I discovered the Hearst Foundation is who owns and publishes that magazine. And I found this link. Hearst is a huge conglomerate, if you don't know, huge media conglomerate, very old. And that, not specifically 17, but that there's partnership with Walt Disney. And the hot take that came to my mind was, again, like an incentivized infantilization of women, just celebrating like adolescence and maidenhood and projecting that to the culture at large, so that whether explicitly stated or not, mother and crone-ship are devalued and forgotten. And what does that mean when we are devaluing the wisdom of eldership, or not showing it as something to be celebrated? And what does it mean to perpetuate this signal that you're unworthy as you mature? And so fight that as much as possible.
Yeah, it fits into what you were saying earlier about like resisting the rhythm of life, like resisting the change, resisting the gray, whether it's just body hair or the gray hair or the breast changes or the belly expanding in pregnancy, postpartum, the hips shifting, and yeah, there's that desire to stay in that infantilized state and then to be rewarded, and then have the other half of the population, the male sex, be conditioned to that infantilization and not know anything different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what's so scary about where we are now to me, is that we are dealing with adult men and adult women, let's say, who have lasered, who have permanently removed their hair, who have never seen or who do not regularly see a woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about the Botox, we're talking about the reclaiming birth, but it's like getting even more to the basics, not ever having the opportunity to see our mothers or our grandmothers in an unaltered state. It's
Mm-hmm.
wild. So I had been going to births for about 2 years before I saw a woman's pubic hair that had not been altered.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was a very religious woman. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I found that my religious clients were far more embodied than my secular clients.
Mm-hmm.
And my jaw dropped. I was shocked. I didn't know what I was looking at. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it was completely foreign to me because I had never seen it on a woman in my family. I had never given myself the opportunity or permission to not alter my own pubic hair. And I was 26, had gone to probably 50 births at that point. And that's what it took.
Mm-hmm.
So we are all suffering under like the distortions as you describe them. Yeah, we're in the situation now that like, okay, the women who are kind of waking up to this issue, let's say they're in relationships or even navigating this with their family or their friends, and they're like, wait, I just like want to be as I am. And the people around them, maybe it's an intimate partner, is simply like not used to it. When I say not
Mhm.
used to it, like I mean like has anchored arousal to an infantilized version of woman over and over and over and over, maybe since they were like 10 years old. Talking
Yeah.
about like men in their 30s and 40s. Like, so this is what really worries me. I'm still like, go for it, women. Like if you're ready to like take the leap and like never remove your body hair, like it go for it. And like it's actually like a huge jump to take given the expectations, given the conditioning. It has the potential, and I've seen it, I've experienced it. It has the potential to really challenge relationship, sexual relationship.
Yeah. Hearing that, it reminds me of a comment from your reel. A woman, I can't remember her age. I want to say she said she was in her 50s, but that she could remember like intact pubic hair. I think that a lot of this ties into porn culture, the distortion that has created for men and for women, which is particularly loud, I would say, in the last 30 years, 40 years. And like, again, that's in your realm of experience, even if you're not in partaking in watching porn. If your partner or husband has ever, it has implanted this idea of what is sexy, what is stimulating. I think that that's a potential like rabbit hole as far as why we feel the way that we feel.
It was the hardest for me to grow out my leg hair. It was the last thing that I did. I didn't have an issue like never getting a Brazilian wax again. I thought it was like torture and I couldn't understand why I would pay someone to like torture me. So that wasn't hard to let go of. Armpit hair was a journey, but the leg hair was the most difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because I genuinely thought it was ugly. Like I thought it looked bad. I thought it ruined my outfits. I remember having the thought like, wow, I look so pretty, but like it doesn't match.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't match. It's off. It's throwing off. It's throwing something off. Like I remember thinking it was ugly. It was throwing off my outfit. I remember feeling like I looked like cartoonish.
Mm.
But in terms of the sensory part, I hadn't had, I'd never had full length hair as the age that I was. Like the last time I had, like, I think I started growing out my leg hair when I was like 25. But before that, the last time I had leg hair, I was probably like 9 years old. So when it grew and became very soft, because you have to let it grow to make it soft, otherwise it's just prickly. For a while, I would like swat my leg, thinking that a hair from my head had become wrapped around my calves because it was just such an unfamiliar sensation to feel the wind in my leg hair.
Mm-hmm.
It was so weird. So there's a huge sensory leap to take because you're literally just going to be feeling more. And I think for the men too, they are going
Mm-hmm.
to be feeling more. They're going to be feeling more of you and seeing more of you. And now, I mean, I've just like done so much like just meditating on this issue for so long that now all I see is like an eraser tool when I look at women who have removed their body hair. I don't see it as it's supposed to be perceived. Does that make sense? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it as the result. I only see the apps. I only see the absence. That's because I'm me, right? But I can only see the invisible of what was. Uh,
Yeah.
do you have
Yeah.
that experience? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of want to put it a little bit further into context when I said the hair is an antenna, the skin is the outside of the brain. Like literally, when we are gestating, the skin, the brain, the spinal cord all come from the same primitive cells, the ectoderm. And for the first 3 weeks of gestation, it's all kind of souped up. And at week 4, they appear to differentiate with brain and spinal cord fusing. And then the skin becomes this boundary that migrates out. And that is the boundary towards which everything internally grows towards. And when I said that it's the outside of the brain and that neurologists accept this, like you can see the skin as a circuit board. And, you said something to the effect of like, more of me, like your partner will get more of you. The skin it's the interface with your environment. And it is how we discover like what we are through the tactile experience of our experience. When you think about senses, touch is the only sense that is full body. Everything else is located in the head. Yeah, and as far as the prickliness sensation, again, it's years of numbing out. I hear that so often. Oh, I can't, like, just so prickly. And it's like, yeah, that's a huge part of your body, the lower half to be exact. And if you have been numbing out for perhaps decades, it's akin to, I'll say from my experience, like I smoked cannabis for a decade of my life. When I stopped smoking cannabis, sober life was different. It's the same thing with sensational input. It's different, and there's a lot of it, and it takes some getting used to. Yeah, so I would just encourage women and men, if you are like shaving, be curious and patient, because your baseline will shift.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. That's such a great way to put it. The baseline will shift to the point where you're like me and you're like seeing like you're like hallucinating armpit hair and leg hair on all the women you see now, because you know that that's how it would be. There weren't all the programming. Yeah. Ooh, and then there's a lot. I've read a lot on the internet about like the spiritual side of the antenna. Like we've talked about it. You've talked about it from a nervous system perspective, and then we've talked about it from like kind of like classism of the Darwin theories around beliefs around the dirtiness of body hair. What can you say or share about the case for it being like a potential portal to like a spirit realm or like a spirit world?
I feel more specifically that about head hair myself. And when you think about, it's a very common practice for incarcerated people to have their heads shaved. I found that it used to be a marker for slavery, not just in America, but elsewhere, that if someone was enslaved, you could literally take their personhood by taking their hair. One of my favorite quotes is by Robert Anton Wilson, and he says, we go around looking for the sorcerer's stone, God, or whatever. The whole time it's the human nervous system. When I think about numbing out and you're not in contact with the creation that you are a part of, that's a spiritual issue. Yeah. Wow. And I think like the more that you are interfacing, like, because we are a part of creation, no matter what your creed is or sect or religion. Yeah. If you're not living in the truth of that, it's kind of a spiritual bypass or shutdown, in my opinion.
Yes. Wow. I'm just sitting with that. Like that this is a spiritual issue. We're in a spiritual, well, of course I think most people would agree we're in a spiritual crisis. We're in like we've got a lot of problems, but yeah, I just want to reiterate that I think that this body hair thing is like it unlocks so much. People were kind of like patronizing me and talking about this issue. Well, don't we have bigger problems? Well, don't we have
Mm,
bigger issues to deal with? Like on the spectrum of like issues that women are dealing with globally, like isn't this kind of not a big deal? But it just is so multifaceted and it relates to so many other issues. I mean, we're always talking about disembodiment, like in the context of the gender stuff. And Mary Lou talks about this in the inoculating our kids against trans ideology. She talks about like examining your own relationship to your bodily practices.
mhm,
What are your daughters? Are you in a home where your daughters think it's normal to bring knives to your yoni? Like,
mhm,
and to your armpits and to your legs and to your arm hair and to your face and to your happy trail and to like, fill in the blank wherever you grow hair.
mhm.
Is it like bringing just the concept of like bringing a knife to my yoni? Why? Just like the principle, like just reducing it to describing what the act is. It's bringing a sharp object to the most delicate part of the body, the part of the body that creates more life, bringing a knife to that part of the body. Like, why?
Yeah. Yeah, we really have to think about the example that we're setting, especially for children. I think I don't have children. I hope to one day. But as parents, we're responsible for creating the parameters of the reality tunnel that our children live in. And children are like sponges, especially up till like pre-birth to 7 especially, but always they're taking in their environment, and we can send so many messages subconsciously or without words, without even realizing it, how we're perceiving ourselves. We're implanting that, like,
Mhm.
to how they will see themselves as an adult.
Yes. Yes. And I really resent when this critique is taken to, well, are you saying we shouldn't, wear makeup or take care of ourselves or like twisting it again into like a adornment or like hygiene thing. And it's like there is absolutely a way that we can practice ritualizing our care for self in a way that does not harm. Whenever I'm getting dressed or putting on earrings or clothes, like I'm asking myself, like, what is more important here? Is it how I look or how I feel? And what is
Mm,
the choice where both are met, where I feel good, like meaning I'm not in pain. And I also believe that I look good. Kind of the example that I always come back to is like super heavy earrings. Am I going to wear a pair of earrings that causes inflammation in the whole of my ear and creates an aching pain and maybe even an infection because the metal is shit or whatever, but I really liked how it looked.
mhm,
And so, yeah, modeling choices to our daughters and our sons, choices that don't compromise our well-being and our health and our body. That you had mentioned the becoming smaller. You'd also said to me in prep for this, that we are taught to contract and not expand, and
mm,
so what choices are we making? Are we sucking in? Are we squeezing? Yes, and I think you're right. Like the spirituality of hair antenna generally applies to the hair on the head with like wearing the bun and charging it with the sun. And at the end of the day, brushing the hair, all the oils and all the wisdom from the sun, like brushing it all through and absorbing it. But I think of like a porcupine, like with our like armpit hair, like hair, just like boop, radar, like
mhm,
an animal.
mhm.
Like, why do mammals have hair? It's a protective element.
Mhm,
It keeps them warm. It makes them heightened to predators. It has a function, and ours does too. Is it essential for our survival, we can live long, happy lives, by continuing to shave different parts of ourselves. But like this episode and these questions, this conversation is about like what we are potentially missing out on by doing so. And is this the direction that we want to see humanity continue in? Or are we committed to true self-acceptance and embodiment and biology?
Mhm.
Maybe we could end on like some practical wisdom for women who are dealing with this on a personal level.
Mm.
What would you say to a woman who is wanting to keep her body hair intact, but is with a romantic partner who has a strong preference for her to remove it and is perhaps even protesting, withholding affection or sex, based on this choice?
Hmm. Yeah, that makes me really sad to think about someone doing that, withholding affection. I think that this topic, again, requires a lot of grace and compassion for self and other. And this is not something that I've had to deal with, like pushback from my partner, whom I was with when I really stopped altering my body in that way. It was never, I never needed a conversation around it. But if I did need a conversation around it, I would present the facts as they are, which is that at a physiological level, this is numbing out. And if it's something that you desire to shift in your experience, to live a fuller experience and expression of self, I would hope that my loved one would be supportive of that, or at least be open to expanding themselves to experiencing it.
Yeah, that's a super gracious response. Accepting that this is the culture, this is the point that we're at, this is what people are used to and expecting, but that it's also an invitation to examine if they're willing. My response would be, and I've used this on a personal level, is like not matching the energy around it. Like if someone is saying this is a real problem and a real issue and maybe even a deal breaker, understanding that it is coming from a place of just it being so foreign, not necessarily being a tool of control. It might also be. They're not mutually exclusive, but I guess what I'm saying is not necessarily taking it at face value, right? That understanding that, wow, like even for me to get here and not think my leg hair is ugly, gosh, it took, I would say, years,
Mm-hmm.
and even still sometimes I'm imagining what it would look like without, because
Mm-hmm.
that's how I saw the dress advertised on the website where I bought the dress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think would happen if more women stopped removing their body hair?
Mm, spicy question. No, I really think it's a little repetitive to say, but I do feel in myself, I associate this with prolonged maidenhood,
Mm,
with overvalue of adolescent experience. And ultimately, if women were given or gave themselves more permission to expand into the rhythm of life and accept their bodies as they move through life, and all of the changes that go along with that. Oh, just like a relaxed wisdom. Like when I say it and when I feel it, I'm just like, oh, yeah, like That it's okay. And women would be more embodied, which for me feels is equated with more empowered, truly empowered. Less time devoted to how am I being perceived, and more time could be devoted to how do I want to affect the world. Yeah. I think expansion, if I had to put it into one word, there would be an expansion for women for sure.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for doing this episode. And I also want to encourage anyone listening to this episode to spend some time in the comment section of the reel that was inspired by many conversations with Danielle on this topic on my Instagram page. We had responded to a couple of the more generally some of the arguments there, but included in that comment section is also some awesome stories of women's own journey from removal to reclaiming what is just biological. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this content. And if you do share it on social media, don't forget to follow and tag me at Whose Body Is It? So until next time.